All right, welcome into the Noll Road. We have breaking news this evening. I'm actually from my truck at my kids' soccer practice. We have another new Steeler as they've won the Asante Samuel sweepstakes. If you could call it that, they signed him after today's workout. Like what they saw. How much do we like the addition? Let's talk about that. Plus, I've had people inside the NFL tell me today they do believe the Steelers could get draft compensation for Mike Tomlin if they did decide to trade him. That's a surprise to me, but I do think I found the perfect team to try to trade him to. Hit the like button if you like Asante Samuel or you want to see the Steelers trade head coach Mike Tomlin. Let's talk more about both those things. Here we go.
Van to the corner of the end zone. Oh, for a touchdown!
Yeah, buddy, I'm Gavin Dawson, and with me, as always, my favorite football Neanderthal, Newbear Wisniewski. How we doing, buddy? Am I coming in loud and clear?
Dude, you sound better than you do at your house. Maybe we should go out to buy you the driveway.
Hey, I asked Google to recommend the ultimate podcasting laptop. I guess it has delivered. But first, here on the Noll Road tonight, the Steelers add Asante Samuel Jr. We've been talking about this since midsummer, bro. Spinal fusion surgery this spring, had a chronic shoulder situation that crept into the neck. It was bad for him, but cleared for full activities last week. How excited should we be about this addition?
Yeah, I mean, low risk, high reward, and potentially very, very high. This becomes a really interesting, plug and play is one of the things where, you're seeing some former Steelers and not just DBs and not just DBU type guys, big guys and longtime guys, and Debo will weigh in, I'm sure, just basically saying, get this guy in the lineup as soon as you can. He's versatile. He's frisky, like pesky, aggressive. He'll catch that ball and take it the other way. Like, lot to like about this move. I didn't think he was going to make it to Pittsburgh.
No, we talked about this last week, and it was like his sixth visit. And I'm like, man, that's a lot of buildings to get through with people giving you take it or leave it type of offers. And, I do wonder how desperate the Steelers are, if they offered more playing time, more money. Obviously with the Darius Slay concussion situation and moving Ramsey to safety, they might have a bigger need than the other teams. But I think this just comes down to one thing. If he can get back to 2022-23, Asante Samuel Jr., the Steelers just added one of the top 15 corners in the game, and he's going to be around here for a long time. This will be much more than a rental.
He was a top 25 free agent, period. And he would have been, without the neck, he might have been top 10. This is a dude, because of his youth and his ball skills, like play-making ability, when you can score on defense, when you can give your offense extra possessions without this neck thing. And you know what's funny? We talked about, you said, I didn't correct you right away, so I'm not pinning this all on you. But like Tiger Woods had something similar, right? Peyton Manning had something similar. I brought up DK straight away, and obviously Peyton Manning was at the point in his career where he was basically taking a knee if you were getting close to him, right? But
yeah,
Rob Gronkowski had the microdiscectomies. And look, there are, before you come clapping at me in the comments about spinal fusion, microdiscectomy, the difference between in this scheme of cervical related, neck and spine related stuff, the numbers, there are some studies that show like the vast majority, as many as 13 out of every 15 guys come back and play and are just fine.
Yeah, there's examples. Here in North Texas, we had Prince Fielder, the great slugger, that had to have a spinal fusion, and it was it for him. So I think this can go either way. I imagine last year, 2024, he was playing with quite a bit of discomfort, maybe even more discomfort than he will post-surgery, and he was still pretty average, and pretty average could help the Steelers back there right now.
Well, speaking of discomfort, one of the things that made the Steelers real comfortable was that Okonkwo did the surgery. I think that's another reason why the player and the agent were willing to let it play out, because they were able to walk into all those buildings and say, you have doubts? Well, the guy who fixed this thing is in Pittsburgh, so we'll just see ourselves out.
Next branch on the topic tree. I was reading Chris Halleck's story. He agreed with you. Low risk, high reward. and says Samuel's going to debut on the practice squad this week, and if he's impressive, could join the lineup later. I hope that's just organizational language, like let's get the pressure off, and they have their fingers crossed that he's dynamic in practice tomorrow, and he's immediately in the starting lineup. I don't know. Do you trust Eccles, Pierre, Porter enough? Or would you trust them more than Samuel coming off of surgery? How do you look at that situation of when Samuel plays and how?
Yeah, rust is rust, and deficiencies are deficiencies. So this is going to be something that probably plays out over the course of a couple of weeks. And when you look at,
I was just thinking for Cincinnati, we got the Bengals. Chase and Higgins.
Yeah, and so this is where this
all
gets
hands on deck.
Do you want him chasing Jamar Chase? First game. And then at the same time, it's like, look, man, on Sunday, everybody's this good. Obviously, Chase is the
I'd like to at least
best.
have him available. I'd like to have him available if we're struggling for 20 snaps.
Well, and it'll be nice too the sooner you do it, the sooner he gets. It's going to take a couple weeks for him to be truly comfortable. Hell, it might take, all the way into a playoff run for him to really have his legs and his conditioning and not be 1,000,000% not afraid to put his face in the fan, because he is pesky, man. People talk about, he's on the smaller side, right? He's a 5'10" guy, and that's, every bit of everything he's got, especially now with, you lose a little bit, I imagine, when they fuse your spine. Don't you lose a little bit if you were 5'10" and an eighth at the combine, maybe now you're 5'9" and 3/4. But, all kidding aside, the thing about this is the way it all plays off of each other, because I keep wanting to call him Juan Pierre. If you remember the old baseball player, speaking of guys, who are long and
Marlins,
have traits,
right?
and can run and stuff. But what Pierre is doing, I saw something that they were saying he has 6 passes defended and 11, true targets or something. Obviously those numbers aren't going to hold up. Otherwise he would be better than Darrelle Revis or anyone else you would ever put out there. So it'll be interesting to see if you can get him. The sooner you can get him going, the better he's going to be the further you go.
Yeah, I looked up the PFF numbers on Pierre because I was like, man, it just seems like he brings some juice, and 111 snaps, his numbers would put him in Pro Bowl territory over 111 snaps. Maybe that's not a big enough sample size yet, but I don't know what the fall off is from old man Slay giving you no big plays to Pierre and to that extent Eccles. I think they're both more physical.
Yeah, and the other thing is when you're a guy who's notorious, when you're a guy big play Slay, it doesn't matter if he's washed. People want to beat him. People want to be able to say they beat big play Slay because you carry that with you, to the end of your days. And he's still out there chirping, talking about how great he is and introducing himself as such, talking about how, when he was in Philly, they weren't good until the Cooper DeJean switch. And then a switch was flipped, and that becomes a Super Bowl leading the team. The defense leading the team to a Super Bowl victory. And that's what's going to happen with this, rest in peace, Pittsburgh Steelers career, Juan Thornhill, greatest defense of all time, history-making defense, right? So, blessing in disguise. Sometimes, injuries create opportunity. Maybe Slay gets a chance to take a step back and get his legs under him at the same time. And maybe this becomes a situational thing where, Pierre's a bigger, longer corner than Samuel. Samuel's more instinctive. Samuel's a bigger playmaker. Slay is the best of those three if he's not washed. Over the course of time, when you look at, what they've put on the field and what they've done, Slay at one point in time was one of the best. And now it's just a matter of how much does he have left. All those things kind of get mitigated. Some of Pierre's lacking traits that make him an undrafted practice squad type guy. Samuel having you can't talk about Asante Samuel Jr. without talking about Asante Samuel Sr. And if he would have just squeezed the pumpkin on the sideline, you never have to hear about Eli Manning ever again. But we also might have to get to see Tom Brady ever again, because I firmly believe if they would have went undefeated, he would have been playing until he was 45.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I want your thoughts on this. When everybody does get healthy, assuming that happens at some point, Samuel has a couple of weeks. Who are your 3 main guys? I liked what you were saying, like it might be rotational and matchup dictated.
Right.
But I think it could easily be Porter, Samuel, and somebody else other than Slay. No picks last year in Philadelphia, but he still covered decent. They decided to become too expensive to hang on to. They let him go. And, not much production this year in terms of ball skills. I think we're right in that time period where he's becoming washed up, and it might have already happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the best players, Ramsey going to free safety, changing everything, the Duggar trade, which, I think we're all going to look back. Hopefully this keeps up, as pissed off as we all still are about wide receiver 2, unless Roman Wilson season actually happens. The Duggar trade ends up potentially being one of the things that saves this team. And then let's not forget Jabril Peppers is still out there kind of lurking in the weeds. So that back end you feel pretty good about those three. Now, the first three up front, when you start talking about matchup based or who's got fresh legs, the best three players are, well, what would it be now? It would be ASJ, JPJ, and right now, by everything we're seeing, eye test and PFF metrics, it'd be James Pierre. I mean, having said that, though, I'm still high on Eccles, and I particularly like him as a undersized, like go fight for every inch guy. The same way everybody liked Beanie Wells, and I know they're 40s and a lot of their stuff match up, but I always felt like Beanie didn't play as fast. Beanie didn't play to some of those on paper traits as Eccles does. And I was in the stadium last year watching George Pickens dunk on him the other way, and then you go, okay, well, that's George Pickens, enter the matrix. I like Eccles still, definitely like him. I mean, Slay might be your fifth corner now, which if he's healthy and he's a veteran presence, in a matchup situation where they're letting you get handsy and physical and him and JPJ can kind of run together, it's not something that you mind when everything's on the line.
All righty, up next here on the Noll Road, Dawson and New Bear rocking here with you on a big Tuesday night. How hot's the city of Pittsburgh right now talking about the future of Mike Tomlin trying to trade him?
Well, what's so crazy is if people talking about the trade deadline, you guys are playing Madden, you're playing Madden, this stuff doesn't happen. You and I talked the last time we got in here about how it's a new era with all this data, PFF and all the different things, next-gen stats. Things are different. But what people kind of seem to conveniently forget is that, I think everyone knows Belichick was traded, right? I think everyone knows Parcells, Belichick's mentor, was traded. I think everybody forgets that Tampa traded 2 1s and $8 million to Oakland for Gruden. Guys like Herm Edwards, even Bruce Arians, Sean Payton were traded. But do you remember Mike Holmgren getting traded? Do you remember? I know you're getting up on 50, but like this stuff really does go all the way back to Don Shula. Once upon a time, Miami sent a 1 to the Colts for Shula.
And that was the original one, right? Like in 1970. I looked these up earlier today. I had forgotten about the Holmgren and a couple of other those that you just mentioned, but I think it's notable it's only happened 7 times. Sure.
Right. But from 1970, this is what I'm saying, though. From 1970 to 1997, it only happened once. The 6 of the 7 have happened since then, and you're talking about 2019, right? 2019 for Arians, 2023 for Peyton, and now we'd be talking about Tomlin. You would now be on a track where every 2 or 3 years you're seeing this thing move.
Yeah. I had somebody tell me that they could get something, but didn't know what it would be. If you could seriously get a 1 right now for Mike Tomlin, I would be surprised considering
yesterday
how poorly the decade has gone. But yes, you would have to do that instantly. I just don't know how the Rooney family is looking at this. Is this like a legitimate conversation, or do you think this is fan and sports radio land?
Both, yes, right. It's what's going to be interesting about this is how hard of a stance. I think the Rooneys would like to have a nice bow of the draft and 20 years. I think if he gets to go out on his sword and is one of those guys that would get to kind of say, when it's my time, I'll let you know, then you would like that to happen. Storybook clean, draft comes through your city, and 20 years on the nose. Having said that, go get the coach to be excited about that's going to actually take this team into the future. The thing that bothers me when you think about the way the Kenny Pickett thing went down is that like Colbert and those guys on the way out tried to like do what Ozzie Newsome did for Baltimore with Lamar. You want to set your last first rounder as the next great quarterback, or the one that takes you back to the Super Bowl promised land and keeps you on that level for a real long time, right? I mean, when you go back over time with the Pittsburgh Steelers, you can't talk about Chuck Noll without talking about Terry Bradshaw. They're synonymous. You can't talk about Cowher into Tomlin. Roethlisberger has crossover, right? Super Bowls with each respectively. And so as you go through the machinations of this, why would Mike Tomlin, if you are prepared to move on from him, why would you let him make that decision for, his quote unquote guy, if that's why they're hoarding all these picks to move up and go get the quarterback, if it's not Will Howard and if Aaron Rodgers is going to make a cameo? Why wouldn't you bring in the Ben Johnson that is actually going to be the guy who coaches him up to get him as ready as he can be, as fast as he can be, to really get on that ramp and move on from this post-Tomlin malaise?
Yeah, there's so many different ways of looking at it. Like, I think part of me would be scared that nobody in the organization would know that you need to sell out and go get a Ben Johnson, or go get a guy off the McVay or Shanahan tree, or Clint Kubiak in Seattle, who's been working with McDonald and really getting
Bobby Slowick in that same area.
Yeah, I think who in this Steelers organization is going to insist that a coaching search stresses guys that are going to use analytics, self-scouting, and deception to gain an advantage on both sides of the ball? And if I'm not hearing that, then I think you're going to get like something like Mike Holmgren, and you'll just get basically, an outdated coach in a different wrapping.
Did you mean to say Mike McCarthy?
What did I say? McDaniel?
You said Holmgren. Holmgren.
Oh, Holmgren. Yes, I meant to say McCarthy. And no disrespect to Pittsburgh. I thought my time covering McCarthy was outstanding. I thoroughly enjoyed him as a person and as a football storyteller, but I would be terrified if he became the Steelers head coach.
Well, here's the thing though about McCarthy is that he's taken this year to go study. He's going to be at John Gruden's Fired Football Coaches Association, and I'm just saying
he told the same shit to the Cowboys 6 years ago. Peter King wrote a big old story about him. It was all BS.
All I'm saying is, if you're going to look at the narrative, the same way they would want Tomlin to get his shot to finish the 20-year loop and to go out, and be the guy, waving goodbye one last time from that draft stage, the ties that bind this city, McCarthy being a Pittsburgh guy is all I'm trying to say. When you look at it, though, and you start talking about data, you're talking about Jesse Minter. You brought up a couple of the other young guys, on the Shanahan tree. Where this gets really interesting is when you go through the rest of the season based on who they're going to play, you're going to get to see some of these guys up close. Like if Joe Brady and Josh Allen come out and hurt you, like how do you not see what the other teams are doing and the stratosphere that they're playing in, and not look at them and be like, oh yeah, I see that. And that's what I want to look like. That's where we need to take this thing.
Yeah, I would laugh at a team that traded for Tomlin, right? Because they would be guilty of the thing I've just talked about. And I don't know how many organizations in football are thinking along these lines. Maybe it's half of them now. Like 10 years ago, it was only a handful, and it's grown. So, I think it'd be tough to find a team, to me, that would be willing to trade for Tomlin because of all the things that you need. Number one, the front office and ownership has to be ignorant to these facts that we're talking about right here. Number two, you have to look past a decade of mediocrity where all you can say is they didn't have a losing season. That was it. Then you have to find a team that wants a defensive-minded coach, which is roughly only a third of the league at any given time is defensive-minded coaches. And then, elephant in the room, you have to find an ownership group that wants a black coach. And I'm not convinced that all owners want to do that or would be open-minded to that. So,
you beat me to that one, which is real interesting because one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about, simply, flatly, and plainly, because of the chatter around the Rooney Rule in and of itself, perhaps being a reason that you don't want to besmirch the family name and the legacy that's attached to what Tomlin represents, that you cannot deny. How about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame?
Yeah, a lot of good coaches out there, and it's nothing against a black coach from my perspective. It doesn't matter to me, but I just think the old bones of football, the owners, the Kaepernick stuff from 10 years ago, I think revealed that there are still some pretty outdated views on that thing. I don't think Jerry Jones would ever hire a black coach, and I don't know how many people agree with him, but at the bare minimum, it reduces the field of teams that would possibly want to trade for Mike Tomlin, in my opinion.
How about the old Bones comment and Steve Spagnuolo checking the defensive-minded box as well? He also seems pretty damn comfortable, in Kansas City playing second fiddle to Andy Reid and Mahomes. However, you brought up recently that they seem to be just pretty cool, chilling, and we'll figure it out when we get to the postseason mode and maybe don't have that same urgency. Maybe he wants one more shot to run his own thing, on the way out. There's a lot of really interesting potential ways that this goes. I want to see them. This will never happen. You want to talk about things that will never happen? They should go hire Brian Daboll tomorrow and bring him in to be the OC in waiting and be an offensive consultant, just like they never should have let Brian Flores leave. And when you go through and unpack a lot of these things, I think it's way less likely or way more unlikely that any of the cool things we would actually want to see happen from an assistant coach, from an ideas people, from a consultancy perspective under Tomlin to actually put the type of staff around him that he needs to get current than it would be for him to get shipped to New York City.
There you go. That's the team that I was going to bring up, actually, that I think could make the most sense. That to my knowledge, they are pretty clueless on what it takes to win in the NFL. They hired Jason Garrett to be an OC 5 years ago, which shows they don't mind predictable play calling.
And Aaron Glenn kind of broke down that barrier, right? I mean, you would now be basically having the two of them squaring off against each other, Tomlin and Glenn, right? Literally in the same stadium in terms of, whether there's an appetite for it, amongst your general manager or your ownership group. And quite frankly, I got to give you credit on this. One of the things that you brought up a number of times about the Tomlinisms, about the culture, about the stories, about, the way that he just does business, a franchise in distress, a rudderless ship at sea can use those things. You're the New York Football Giants and you've been in turmoil, how many coaches, how many quarterbacks, how many hard knocks failures that you were turned into memes to the point where your quarterback's winning, you fire the head coach because your team is losing, and all they keep showing is the GM not wanting that guy. So, it's a fascinating time to be alive, to be a New York football fan. And I threw this up there earlier too, on top of all that, what did the Jets just do? They didn't move Breece Hall. They didn't move Quincy Williams and maybe a couple other guys that could have, at least been late round pick swaps. They still have a bleeping war chest going into that draft, the next couple of drafts. And when you think about being the New York Football Giants, and as bad as the Jets, what were they, 0-7 before they won the last two? And they barely look like talk about modern teams. I mean, Justin Fields had 11 yards passing or 21 yards passing. What did he finish with, like 65, 67? Like it was like watching a wing tee leather helmet type game. And then, oh, by the way, here goes Breece Hall doing things that only Breece Hall can do. So the Jets are only going up, and they have a guy that everyone likes and a guy in Aaron Glenn who was part of a teardown in Detroit. So not just a guy who's a really good DC and who knows what it could, would, should. He did it as part of a core group in Detroit, and they figured that out. You think he doesn't have a blueprint, a plan? You think, buddy, man, like if you're the Giants, this would be the move to make in terms of grounding everything and giving yourself the best chance to nuke it and rebuild in a new world where it doesn't matter that the coach's things are outdated because you actually just need a grown-up in the room.
Could you imagine getting their pick, which is going to be top 10, maybe top 5? I don't think they would give that up. I'd be shocked. Maybe a 2027 1 or a 2026 2, something like that. But I think most Steelers fans would rejoice just at the idea that you get something and be getting rid of Mike Tomlin. I don't think it's going to happen. The Dolphins could be interesting. They just fired their GM. Mike McDaniel's about to be out. They've had a bad experience with a coach who emphasized motion and deception and analytics. So maybe they're going back for a tone setter. There are a lot of teams out there that if you ask the owner, Do you want a tone setter leader of men, or do you want guys with the best X's and O's? It's 50-50, so those teams might look at Mike Tomlin and say, this is going to be the perfect thing that we need, especially with the dumpster fire culture that Mike McDaniel has, sort of devolved into after a hot start there.
Well,
the Cardinals go ahead.
Let's not forget what his name just ran out of my head. The hell is the name of? I almost said Joe Robbie. Who the hell owns the Miami Dolphins? Stephen Ross, right? Stephen Ross.
Sure. Yeah, there you go.
He beyond talking about black coaches. I mean, he was the one in he's in the Brian Flores lawsuit, but he was also the one who lost picks and got fined for tampering to go get Tom Brady. He's been trying to get it grown up since the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're obviously one of the teams that would check many of the boxes for possibly looking at Tomlin. I mentioned the Cardinals there, Jonathan Gannon. I think they're probably if they move on, they're going to try to go bring Clayton Adams back. When he walked out that door, he took their offense with him. Cincinnati, if they fire Zach Taylor, I don't think they would give up draft picks for a coach.
He's not going to Cincinnati.
They spent that just doesn't make sense. Titans are a maybe. I think Titans are a maybe.
I think he'd like to with Cam Ward. That'd be nice.
Yeah. But let me say this, we just watched 4-time World Series manager Bruce Bochy, mutually parting of ways with the Texas Rangers. Everybody thought he's going back to the San Francisco Giants where he won his first 3 World Series. Nope. They don't want him. Rangers don't want him. 4-time champ, nicest guy in baseball. Sometimes you just can't, it just doesn't make sense, why an accomplished veteran coach, but there's only so many openings. Mike McCarthy spends a year out of football for the second time since he left Green Bay. There's only so many openings. So I hope the Steelers aren't waiting to need to get a draft pick to move on from Tomlin. I hope they go into this offseason thinking if that happens, that'd be great, but we ain't getting to March with him still on the roster.
You know what I would almost love to see, and I don't think this will happen because I think he's such a Sunday guy, but with even obviously James Franklin getting run out of town and, Dable's on his front porch in the snow with a Penn State hoodie on and everyone's talking about, oh, what's going on here? But how crazy would it be where you see guys like you talking about your message getting stale and Dabo Swinney or some of these other big programs that have coaches that are still kind of waiting. Florida fired Napier after a win because they only won because the other team was already in field goal range and they threw a pick to a 350-pound nose tackle on a fire blitz. And they were like, you know what? We've seen enough of the circus. This is a guy who never should have left Louisiana Lafayette. But there's going to be more college guys that go down. And I mean, could you imagine if an NIL booster group came in with $100 million offer for him to just go talk to college kids? Sometimes when I hear the messages and sometimes when I hear just the way he does business, I feel like that's almost where he belongs.
Man, that's a great point. His leader of men stuff, his mantras, and it would cycle out every 4 or 5 years, or in this era, maybe every 1 or 2 years, he's getting new guys. I think a lot of parents would be stoked to send their kid off to university to play and learn from Mike Tomlin on how to be a man and how to play football.
Yeah, man. It'd be really interesting to see because it's a different era. I wouldn't have said this before NIL, but now that things are changing enough in college, I think college is going to get more interesting to the Fired Football Coaches Association. You like you said, there's only so many jobs. There's only so many of these gigs. And once you've been an NFL head coach, it's hard for other, particularly young coaches, to look at a Mike McCarthy and be like, oh, yeah, that guy's an offensive genius. Let me hire him to be my OC, because they're worried about him thinking he knows more than you, egos and insecurity, right? It'd be really interesting to see Tomlin build a staff where you can go down a level, if you will. But I mean, it's really becoming more and more like the minor leagues. I'm going to stop belaboring the point because I know it's probably not happening if and especially when you're going to have a market like New York. You think he wouldn't want to take that challenge on? Could you imagine the New York Post versus Mike Tomlin on Tuesday?
That would be amazing, dude. Talk about an immovable objects against the irresistible fourth. Brother, we have excitement for the short term here with Asante Samuel Jr. in. This team should be a playoff team. Hopefully it plays better and shores up some of its weaknesses. Got to get this offense untracked immediately this weekend against Cincinnati. But we have the long-term excitement as well with the draft coming up, and who knows what the future of Tomlin could hold. Looking forward to chatting more about it with you in the coming days. We'll be back soon with the Steelers-Bengals preview. For Newberry, I'm Dawson. Until next time, we'll see ya on the Noll Road.